All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining. Music of Finnish composer Jan Sibelius taking us in. So my name's Jason Grillo. I'm the event director for AirMiners, and I want to say welcome and thank you for joining us today. We are holding this event in light of NASDAQ's recent investment in the Puro.Earth marketplace. And to that end, we have panelists Antti Vähäinen and Mariana Tikkanen, co-founders of Puro, who are going to share some of their comments and unpack that a little bit with us today. A couple of items to share. Please stay on mute during our event and put your questions into the chat. We'll have our 35 minutes or so of discussion, then maybe 15 or 20 minutes of Q&A. Then I'll come on at the end to take care of a couple of other housekeeping items and bring us then into our Zoom networking at the top of the hour so that we can get to know each other a little bit better. But the main program is going to stop and it's going to be concluding in 60 minutes time from now. So once again, thanks. And I'm going to now cede the floor to Sophie Prud'homme, who is our moderator for today. Sophie.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks, everybody, for joining. I know it's hot out there for lots of us in the US on the West Coast and even here in New York as well. So hope everyone's staying cool and safe. But tuning in from the other side of the world, right, we've got the Puro team. So thanks for joining us. Let's kick this off with some very brief introductions. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself first, Antti?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, of course, for the opportunity to have this discussion. It's of course, a delightful opportunity. Antti is my name. I'm the other co-founder of Puro and also the managing director of Puro company. My responsibilities include mainly the demand side of the marketplace, which means basically working with the buyers of negative emissions. Whereas Marianne, my colleague, who clearly has just dropped out for one reason or another, is responsible for the supply side of the marketplace, and thus working with the companies and projects that produce negative emissions. So there you are, Marianne. Now, if you unmute, I already told something about your role.
Good. Yeah, I had some problems with the network connection, but now I'm here.
Okay. Yeah, so you're responsible for the supply side and I'm for the demand side. I'm the engineer-minded business guy and you are?
Yeah, economically thinking engineer.
Indeed, that's right.
Amazing team, perfect. And I should say very quickly, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Sophie Prud'homme. Among a few other things, I write a newsletter called Climate Tech VC that goes out to tens of thousands of you good readers weekly. We cover the news, the deals, everything happening in this broad and growing space of climate technology. So feel free to take a look at that if that piques your interest. In the meantime, I wear the investor hat when I'm not writing about it and dive deep into early stage climate technology businesses. So very happy to be here. And I know that we have a lot to cover. There's been some exciting news from NASDAQ, and we want to hear all about that, but also dig into the technology behind Puro, and then open it up more broadly into thoughts, pontifications, projections, trends for the marketplace and what this means for the carbon removal space in general. So we'll kick it off with product and technology, and then open the aperture and hit some of these questions from the audience. So please keep those coming in. But Antti, Marianne, maybe take it back to the beginning. In the news is the exciting fundraise, but take us back to the beginning. How did Puro get started, and what's the founding mission?
Well, the founding mission is actually a very good place to start. Of course, the original idea was that the CO2 concentration in the atmosphere is already too high, and that there are ways of removing CO2 from the atmosphere, but there's no, let's say, incentive or a business model that would drive that change or transformation from, let's say, emitting industries to carbon sequestering industries. So setting up a two-sided marketplace that would facilitate this transformation was an idea that we started working on back in 2018. So
That's
the
the
way we
pitch that Antti came in and pitched it to the head of the incubator at the time, and they said yes to the pitch and started funding then first a concept study and then minimum viable product and going from there. So Antti is really the father of the idea that why isn't this moving? What is a business model missing when the technology is there but nothing happens?
So that's quite early, 2018, for this concept of setting up a dual-sided marketplace for carbon removals. Maybe, I mean, you're clearly ahead of the time, and it's paying off now. For those of us who might benefit from an overview, can you tell us about, I think there's 4 sides that Puro covers to this dual-sided marketplace?
Well, yes. Would you like to start with the supply side, Marianne?
Yeah, so the marketplace is technology neutral for any carbon removal technology that can be verified. We have started with proving the concept by things that were already verifiable. It means that they had a demo site or something in place so that we could actually go and verify them with a third-party verifier so that the data trail is there. So we started with biochar production or biochar removal methodology, carbonated building elements, or mineralization, then wooden products, wooden building elements in long durable structures. Now we have also geologically removed carbon and soil amendments as an addition from the early days, but in general, serving these suppliers that can remove carbon being the preferred place for them to get their monetization of their climate action.
Brilliant. Let's keep running with this thread. So you shared some of those technology categories that Puro works with. How do you go about finding these businesses, or how do they find you? Because as we know, this is still quite a nascent, though growing space. How do you connect with these early stage removals businesses?
It's both ways. They contact us and we contact or find them. So it's very much sort of going both ways, inbound and outbound. I think in general, the carbon flows, if we take a helicopter view, it's not in so many places that carbon can be. If you simplify it very roughly, it's in the atmosphere where we don't want the carbon to be, and then it can be either in biosphere, plants, soil, oceans, or then the geological storage, and then the movements in between these places. There are a couple of mechanisms, physical or chemical mechanisms like the carbonation or mineralization, which can move carbon from one stock of pool to another. So looking at it from that meta level, it's not so many pathways which can remove carbon from atmosphere to a safer storage. And then of course the devil is in the detail, that how many how can you then do that in practice? But yeah, on a meta level, it's that simplistic.
And of those various pathways or sink sources, how would you go about sizing the total addressable market, maybe in CO2 volumes, of potential those potentially, monetizable sequestration pathways?
I think
Go ahead, Antti.
yeah, so we haven't really done that ourselves. We are sort of relying on other sources. Nature Journal had a nice article some time ago, and where they had done a meta-level study from, I guess, 1,000 or something other studies that then resulted in, broad, say, scopes or, let's say, scopes of what could be possible for each one of these pathways. And that ended up being between 10 and 15 gigatons of capacity in the global sense. Of course, there are lots of assumptions associated with but so we believe that that's based on let's say knowledge that was there back in 20 between 2015 and 2019 probably. We are seeing continuously a lot of new innovation. This is really exciting to be in this time and place right now to see what's taking place within this carbon removal industry and innovation. So if that was 10 gigatons back then I'm sure that we can reach at least that within the next several decades.
And you all are literally right at the cutting edge of seeing these new innovations. Maybe Marianne, what are some of the really novel approaches that are coming inbound to you?
There are quite many almost every week. I think some of what have inspired me have been, for example, something what I called biomass burial, where you actually process biomass minimally. So I found it very clever that you would take the best of nature. It's very good in capturing CO2 by photosynthesis, and then do almost nothing with it, but put it in conditions where it doesn't decompose. There is no oxygen. There is no way for it to reappear or re-enter the atmosphere. I found that ingenious in how it took best of everything with minimal work and energy. Also, I like very much these things that where we piggyback on existing material flows. For example, the construction elements, concrete or facade rocks or whatever material that we use anyway. If you currently do it carbon emitting, and there is a way of doing the same same product, same material, carbon sequestering, why wouldn't you? So I think that leaning on the existing material flows is also very clever.
Brilliant. Moving one step further along in the value chain, you've identified the product, the removals supply. Now you move into the verification and certification aspect. I believe you all call that CORC, or CO2 removal certificates. Tell us more about what goes into that process, who's involved, what you're looking for, if that's handled in-house or if it requires a third party, etc.
Yeah, the verification itself is we engage a third party to do that. Of course, they need the rule book, the standard or the methodology against which they verify that all the requirements are met and or validate the calculation of how the sequestration or net negativity is done. In our systems, it's always done based on life cycle assessment, so that you look at all the emissions caused by the activity and then how much is it able to sequester, and the difference, the net of these two is then the carbon removal that forms a cork. And so they have to bring the evidence this carbon footprint calculation. In quite often they need to bring qualities of the product, carbon content, sustainability of the sourcing, end application and usage, where is the carbon finally sitting or stored, and all of this evidence is then collected and reviewed and validated by the third party independent inspector.
Great. Pulling in a direct question from the chat, Patricia asked, who are these organizations that are doing the third-party verification? And then I'd like to add on to that, that sometimes is a time-intensive or resource-intensive, costly process. How's Puro working on that?
Yeah, the cost is actually the reason why we hold it centrally and do it a bit differently than traditionally. It has been a role of the project itself to engage a verifier. We engage them to have a possibility to make the process very efficient, both cost efficient and work efficient, maybe find digital ways of making it more efficient, more digital. And so currently, or we started with De Norske Veritas, which is DNV, very known and more than 100 of years old company globally in 100 countries, working on very many different verifications of projects, of emissions, of energy systems, and so on. Then we have engaged others, expanding the capacity of doing it, Energy Link Services from Australia and BioInspecta. So when there is a need, we can engage others, this type of verifiers that have done it for other purposes and are knowledgeable in doing business assurance.
Helpful. I think this is an important point as the marketplace coordinator and owner. Perhaps you have economies of scale that make it easier to cut down, like you were mentioning, with digital tools on the cost and time intensity of the verification. Can you click one level deeper into that? What do those digital enablers look like?
There's quite a lot. I mean, it's very much an exercise of inspecting record keeping, how good they are in keeping data records and validating those. So how those are uploaded, how they are matched, how they can be sampled. I think that is an area where we have made and can make innovations. Also then seeing what is essential to verify and what is not. Sometimes there we can see that something was not significant if we think of the whole end-to-end carbon footprint or sequestration. So leave out things that are anyway not going to change the big picture. Very many, I believe that is an area where a lot will happen in coming years, how that can be improved.
Brilliant. Maybe over to you, Antti, switching from the supplier side, though I'm sure we'll get back to that with some of the Q&A later on, over to the demand side, bringing in these corporates that want to buy these carbon removals. Who's around the table? Who's knocking down your doors these days? Maybe give us some examples of corporates and what you've seen in trends of what feels like day to day kind of increasing demand for these removals products.
Yeah. Well, we've started mainly with companies that have high sales margins and low emissions. So those were the companies, typically from finance industry, from software, tech in general, companies that also are, have a very sort of aware and intelligent, staff, and lots of very engaged stakeholders. So they wanted to pioneer this area, and the likes of Swiss Re, which was one of our first customers, the world's largest reinsurer, and Microsoft, the software company, of course, and so forth. So these have been good examples as the first types of customers. But we are now seeing, in an increasing way, we are seeing companies, from textile industries, manufacturing companies that produce some products are increasingly, basically realizing that carbon removal is the right way forward, in addition to emission reductions, of course. So we deal mainly with highly we call them climate mature companies that have gone through the process of realizing that they have emissions, measuring them, minimizing the emissions, perhaps trying some offsets, now realizing that they need to go to removals. And beyond, we are seeing also companies that want to invest in these projects directly or indirectly, and even co-innovate with these companies. So it's really a broad spectrum of engagement that we are seeing now taking place, which is of course great, because these suppliers typically have limited access to capital or equity and funding to expand their operations. So this sort of deeper engagement is very welcome for many of them.
Have you noticed any of the very large buyers, of which Microsoft, for example, is a leader, at least stateside? What's the profile of a business that would work with your marketplace? Maybe they're climate advanced, but then you've got the large buyers that are also climate advanced, and it strikes me that they're going direct to some of these removal businesses. Do you anticipate that happening more in the future, or I suppose directly speaking to those folks, what's the pitch for why they should be using a marketplace like yours?
Well, it's good to also remember that Puro is not necessarily only a marketplace. We're also the standard for engineered carbon removal, which means that it's in many cases these business relationships are bilateral between the supplier and the buyer. We are not a counterparty in those transactions if they are large and lengthy transactions. It's as a risk mitigation measure, it's wise for us to not be the counterparty there. But since our business model is charging a transaction fee from the change of ownership, it doesn't really matter where and how the agreement to change the ownership at any given point of time happens. So in that sense, we are actually actively introducing some of the larger buyers, that want to have this deeper level of engagement with the potential supplier. That if they are looking for funding, for example, we introduce them to each other and figure out the right way to go forward. We are always the one that does the verification and the issuance of the certificates, and of course we develop the framework further as instructed by the advisory board that we are now putting together.
I could maybe add here that Microsoft said in their white paper that there is no easy way for a corporate to find and purchase high quality carbon removals. So that's from the buyer side. But equally, the supplier side has a frustration with these numerous RFPs, which all do their own due diligence and answering these invoicing, being inserted into their invoicing systems. I mean, we've done that now several times, so they are quite nice ERP systems that not every supplier wants to do multiple of. So I think that there is very much of friction on both ends that a central matching piece and service place can remove.
Is your company involved in setting pricing standards? It seems you're involved in assigning quality. verification. How does price vary, and do you have any anticipations of whether price will revert to an average or continue to split out as quality is reflected in pricing in the market?
So we don't set the prices ourselves. It's the supplier who owns the certificates and sets the price or the project themselves. We did go through a phase in the beginning where we had periodic auctions, where after which we always published the weighted average price of each auction, so that it acted as a reference price to sort of get the feeling of the appetite of the market. Of course, many things have changed since, but there's been an increasing amount of let's say spread between the cheapest and the most expensive type of cork, which is really again a sign of lack of commoditization, let's put it this way, in the market, which is probably not very good at the end of the day. It would be better if we actually had a real commodity. Well, the same way as explained also in the task force for scaling voluntary carbon markets. It's clearly beneficial for us all to reduce the friction as much as possible, and make it easy to discover these different kinds of projects and suppliers and transact with them.
Running with that theme of the market maturing, give us a sense of maybe not exact numbers. I'm sure you won't want to divulge this, but your impact as an organization so far, in terms of volumes of CO2 or rough numbers of folks on either side of the marketplace. How should we be thinking about the significance of your role in helping orchestrate this market?
Yeah, so of course, what we've done so far is just a scratch on the surface to our projections of what we want to, make in the next few years. But so far, I guess it was something like 80 or 90,000 tons that we've sort of issued so far. And almost the same amount has been sold, and we are in a demand constrained market, supply constrained market, and would of course working very hard to increase this supply from these sort of tens of thousands to several hundred thousands, and then of course to the megaton level. And we have a very good, well, Marianne has a very good roadmap towards that direction.
That sounds like something the audience would love to hear about, just judging from the questions pouring in. And I love the word roadmap. So Marianne, do you want to take a few minutes to tell us more about the approach there?
Yeah, you asked about the number of actors on both sides. So I think we have more than 150 suppliers that have reached out to us or are in the funnel in different stages of being verified. And I think that also it's very encouraging that the volumes, I mean, we have started with the facilities where the removal capacity per year is a demo size from 1,000 to 5,000, and now we are seeing plants that are, or projects that have tens of thousands per year and hundreds of thousands per year in removal tonnages. So I think that that's very encouraging. So if a number of these 150 that have already contacted us could do those volumes in the coming year or two, that would really make our first million tons. So still doing the first million.
What do you think are some approaches or initiatives or even going as far as policies that might help that very early side of the market? So helping businesses get to the point that they might be able to submit a proposal to Puro.
Well, we are actually working on that, and we are officially going to launch it a little bit later with much more detail. But I think it's fair to say that we are working on a platform that allows early stage suppliers or wannabe suppliers, so to say, announce their plans and describe the project that they are planning. Uh, um, Initially in a rather loose, sort of non-binding manner, saying that this is what we intend to do, given that we get a sufficient amount of commitments to purchase our negative emissions, and that we manage to take or gather funding and get the necessary permits and so forth. So this is a process that allows these early stage companies and even well-established companies that need to be able to justify the investment to their financiers that they've got visibility to revenue stream. So we allow that to, or we basically enable that to happen through this platform that we hopefully will be able to launch in September. Yeah, looking forward to receiving a lot of interest. If there are companies or ideas within this group, we would be delighted to get you on board and reach out to contact at Puro.Earth so that we can start working on those initiatives.
Very exciting. I'm sure there are lots of suppliers in the audience, and sign me up as a potentially interested investor. I'm sure there's all sides of the marketplace in the audience today. So
good.
Running with the good news and exciting headlines, would love to cue you up to tell us more about the NASDAQ investment. And I think we're calling it a majority investment, or somewhere along the lines of whatever a Series A kind of looks like these days.
Yeah.
How did that come to be? And in your words, what's your excitement for the partnership with NASDAQ?
Well, we wanted to find a partner or an investor that was would be able to help us a bit in terms of scaling a marketplace. It's hard to imagine any better partner in that sense, because of course NASDAQ has been building marketplaces for quite some time, and also they are a highly sort of they offer or sell basically technology products to over 130 exchanges and other marketplaces. So they are a technology company as well, and of course we can definitely benefit from their technology as well. But I must say that I guess one of the ideas or reasons for setting this up was to discuss what does it mean to the carbon removal industry at large. I think it's slowly sinking in to many companies. Also, for example, the listed companies that are listed in NASDAQ and other exchanges are sort of realizing that well, this must be real if a company like NASDAQ is sort of investing in this field and establishing firm partnerships and saying that we've got a huge ESG offering for listed companies, and we are also helping companies remove the CO2 from their operations. So I think it is really helping us and everybody in this audience and to gain trustworthiness and in a way, more perhaps credibility.
Brilliant. Can you tell us a little bit more about NASDAQ's ESG, other ESG and carbon offerings? Because as you alluded to, they've been at this for quite some time, and curious if they have other initiatives going on, particularly around removals.
Well, we are still waiting, or we are still trying to arrange the NASDAQ ESG family meeting, family gathering. So we are probably not the best experts on the whole variety of aspects that they are working on, but it is good to note that many of the initiatives are about reporting, helping the listed companies express and communicate what their status is in various ESG related affairs. That's our understanding. And clearly they are quite active. I think today or yesterday they announced also a partnership with another Finnish company called Upright, which is again a new sort of AI based company trying to determine all the impacts of a company. So yeah, lots of interesting activity clearly on their side.
No doubt. One question that has always been top of mind for me when looking at, I know that you're not just a marketplace, right? But looking at other marketplaces that have supply and demand side in the removal space, or broadly speaking, it's a question of, is this a winner take all kind of approach, right? Should there be one source of truth where every piece of information is listed, or perhaps it's not a mature enough market yet such that there are pockets of specialization? I'm curious about your take on that, and maybe how this news of the partnership with NASDAQ might be influencing that in the future.
Well, my personal opinion is that for the foreseeable future, there will be several marketplaces and standards. I think what is essential is organizations like science-based targets that are setting the criteria as to what qualifies as carbon removal, as something that is eligible for making net zero claims. Of course, we and probably many others are intent to meet and exceed those criteria, which will then quite rapidly eliminate all the lesser quality offsets from the marketplace, and maybe that will then be the cause of first stage of consolidation. Remains to be seen.
So a flight to quality of sorts.
That's what we expect,
yeah, that would be very sort of a nice scenario that the quality wins. Also thinking of that, if a gigaton or 10 gigatons needs to be removed, and we in our plan reach million and 10 million and 100 million, we need more than one marketplace to make the gigatons. So I think it's clear that one will not be enough.
Great question from Jason here in the chat. Tactically speaking, will corks, or the CO2 removal credits hosted by or verified by Puro, be transacted on the NASDAQ marketplace? I know you haven't yet had your ESG family meeting, but in a perfect future world.
I don't think so. The NASDAQ exchanges are for the stock of listed companies, and this is a different type of security. So it's going to be more similar to other commodities, electricity, oil, corn, soy, whatever there is. Those are much more similar to ours than the actual stock exchanges.
Brilliant. Well, to sum up this section, lots of themes coming through here about flight to quality, maturation of this market, kind of, we've heard this before, but hearing it straight from the source that there's still vast open space for more supply coming into this marketplace, healthy demand on the other side, and a real role to be played in orchestrating all of that data and all of those players. So thanks for digging in with us on those high level questions about the product, technology, and market. I think we've got a lot of engagement coming through in the Q&A and separately from our expert audience here that I'm sure would love to take the opportunity to dig into some details that are most relevant for them individually. So would love to open it up. Jason, however you think this is best to orchestrate, I'm happy to chip in and pop around and summarize, but we'll let you lead the way.
Sure. Thanks, Sophie, and thanks, Antti and Marian. Question from maybe on the supply side from Ryan Anderson. I mean, how do you navigate nationally determined contributions? And speaking about how Puro talks about additionality concerns, is it strictly financial additionality? And if so, is it based on financial disclosure with an agreed upon rate of return?
Those are questions in sort of widely debated internationally at the moment. Carbon negative activity is carbon negative despite of whether it's additional or not. So I think the carbon mathematics or the carbon flow, carbon balance assessment is separate from the financing. Then the additionality is very much a buyer's preference of how they want to spend their money. Do they want to support technology that does not exist yet? Do they want to support the price gap, price difference between the carbon sequestering option or the existing traditional option? Or do they just want to have verified high quality carbon removal where they know that the quality is, the assessment of the actual carbon sequestration and emissions have been done right. So it's their option. We will follow the national determined contributions, show that transparently, is it in or out of that? And then the choice is again in the buyers. What do they prefer to buy, and what do they prefer? How do they claim with what they have? What kind of claim do they make with the purchase?
But I guess it's fair to say that biochar, for example, to our understanding, is outside of the national inventories and therefore also outside of the nationally determined contributions. The same applies to these carbonated building elements and to most cases also to geologic removal. So
far,
in a
many
way,
of these innovations are not captured anywhere. So the statistics and the contributions on national level are, of course, relying on things that are known. And we are very much working with removal methodologies that are still innovative and in their birth. So much of what we do is first time and additional, and would not exist if it didn't receive this voluntary funding.
Cool. Also looking through here, couple of questions on different methodologies, that for one thing, why a 50-year removal minimum, and also a question on methodologies that are photosynthesis and based. I noticed in your methodologies, yet you do have capacity for cementitious products. So for cement, for instance, but curious also perhaps what your future methodology plans are, and maybe would those also need 50-year permanence?
If I may just quickly comment on the 50-year permanence there. So it was a compromise. So we just, had to figure out a figure that was, justifiable, not too long, but something that, we could say that already makes a difference. If we, today make a sequestration that takes the emissions at least way beyond the peak of human emissions, that's better. That's good. Although at the same time, we've realized all along that it, preferably should be thousands of years. And I think it's increasingly going to go to that direction, that the permanence requirements are going to grow, and that's fine. That's probably good. But just this is again something that needs to be set by a body like SBTi or perhaps WRI or some of the other ones. So happy to comply with once there is a common mutual understanding on that.
And there is always the physical world where carbon dioxide resides in the atmosphere. It's not 100 years, it's maybe 150 years. It's a little diffuse number. If people decide on policy, then it's a contract between people and not the physical phenomenon. So I think that it is good to understand those two separately, physics and contracts between people and policies. About the photosynthesis, I mean, like I said, it's a very efficient way to capture carbon. Of course, direct air capture can also be done. We do have the geologically stored methodology for any type of CCS, BECCS, DUCs, and even the liquid forms of carbon. The capture can be any form when it enters the geological storage. Mineralization, the capture is still, or the carbonation, actually the cement is the part that you want to leave out because that's where the emissions occur, but the mineralization or carbonation into the concrete or that type of rocky materials is wanted. And there the capture it could be from a biogas plant, the biogenic CO2, or it could be through direct air capture. So the capture sources can be multiple. Our methodologies do not limit that. Biogenic seems to be quite popular, and I believe it's because of the cost efficiency that it offers and the volume.
Hey, one point related to this geologic sequestration methodology. There's a question about EOR or enhanced oil recovery, and why is that included there? It's actually the other way around. It has not been excluded if and only if it can be proven to be carbon net negative. So of course, only such processes are carbon net negative that remove more than they cause emissions always in our framework. So there is a special breed, special form of EOR that EOR plus or whatever they call it, that can be carbon net negative, but we don't expect to get too many of those in our framework.
Maybe one question pulling from the chat and adding a little bit of Sophie flavor on top of it, sticking with pricing. You have a really interesting vantage point of being able to look at all of the, I believe you called it the bidding process, right, for setting prices. What are some of those characteristics that swing price in a certain direction? For example, we've been talking about permanence. Maybe there are other angles like geography or approach or ability to use that, quality of the CO2 stock for either it's, food grade or able to be put into an input. What are some of those characteristics?
Well, the short answer is permanence. But right. Of course, there are other preferences that companies have. This is clearly one of those topics where not in my backyard is not correct. So it's clear that they do want to have this sort of carbon sequestration as near to their own operations as possible, even though we have just one atmosphere. But they may also value activities that take place in or near their own value chain and so forth. But by far the biggest, let's say, determinant for high price is high permanence.
Interesting. So I'm hearing that right. The buyers, the corporates do want the removal to happen in geographic proximity to their physical footprint. Is that because they want to, they're using, are they using that CO2 input, or they want it for reporting services or feel good YIMBY, the opposite of NIMBY, for YIMBY purposes, or why would that be? Is it maybe reporting or tax driven? I'm curious. This is an interesting insight.
I guess they just want to give back to the community, or make sure that it's a thriving business ecosystem around them and so forth. That's my understanding, at least based on the discussions that we've had. There are certain countries that are especially keen on that. I might say UK, but there are others.
Yeah, I think it's maybe also an ease of telling the story. I mean, we have been, people say that it's nice that we have a tangible, where the carbon sequestration is. It's a material or a storage that you can easily point out and tell. The same with the country, that it's easier to tell a country that people in your company know and your customers know than somewhere where they don't even recognize the name of the country, like Finland. About the price point, I think one aspect is availability. If they need it this year, of course, the availability that you can actually purchase now is important, and that the supply is available when they need it.
Interesting. So timing, proximity, and physical proximity. All right. Let's brand YIMBY for carbon removals. That sounds positive across the board. Some more questions in the chat about details on the LCA, or the life cycle assessment process that you all require. What are some of those boxes that folks need to tick?
In the life cycle assessment, we have not invented anything new. We just ask the suppliers to follow or have their carbon footprint assessment made according to the ISO standards 14064 or 67. So it's very much the same already well-known practice of assessing carbon emissions and carbon content or carbon sequestration in an organization or in a product.
Fair enough. And then bouncing back to the cost side, and then I promise I'll take the economics hat off here. What do you think drives those corporate buyers towards wanting to pay up for longer term removals? I mean, obviously longer is better. You're getting more for bang for your buck, but maybe peel the onion, for lack of a better analogy here. What do you think's behind that? Do you think that they anticipate that there's policy drivers coming down the pike that will further discount the value of the non-permanent removals, or what's going on there?
Well, now we are seeing pre-purchase agreements being negotiated and closed with the time span of 3 to 5 years. From this point of time onwards. So there are certain points or say times agreed and quantities and prices agreed for a transaction to take place. And this is, of course, to ensure availability or access to these negative emissions, and also hedge against price volatility. So these are the main motivations to conduct these deals in particular. And when it comes to the permanence and how long I think it's just common sense. They realize that, and the customers that we deal with currently are really, let's say, invested in this topic, and they are setting the guidelines for others as well. So they realize that. So if they were now sort of going, well, 10 years is enough, or whatever, sort of, or 1 year is enough, we just delay the emissions with 1 year. Yeah, I don't think that they want to take that risk because they know that they influence the whole market.
Here's a big question for you. What do you think are some common misconceptions about the carbon removals marketplace, either on the supply side or on the demand side, generally speaking?
Well, I think we've come quite far from 2 years ago when we actually had to explain extensively what is the difference between reducing emissions and outsourcing emission reductions to somebody else, as opposed to carbon removal activities. I'm not sure. So I think just today, for example, I've had a conversation with a supplier who used the word carbon removal, even though it was just carbon capture. They were doing a great job in capturing it, but they had no place where to put it. So that was sort of just one bit of the three stages where you have to first capture, then stabilize, and then store the carbon dioxide before it can be called carbon removal. So these things like this, what would you say, Marianne? What would be the misconceptions? Or are there such that would be significant? Marianne might be experiencing a rather long delay there, latency. Oh well, but I would say that we've come a long way from the early days where people wouldn't know what they are talking about. But then perhaps another point is that we are still seeing, or to a worrying amount, or to a worrying number, we had these discussions last spring with sustainability teams that reached out to us and said, now, well, the top management made this pledge, and now we have been thrown the ball to figure out how to do that. And they are, their budget is this small. They've looked at the price of the traditional offsets with a vintage of 2012. And they are prepared to pay 50 cents or $1 per ton, and now they are completely ill prepared to discuss anything related to removals.
Yep. So as with all early markets, still more definitions, understanding common sense around like pricing, but also hearing just rocket ship kind of speed of acceleration over the past 18 months. And glad that we were able to have this conversation in the light of NASDAQ kind of coming on board, and that being a really positive signal for the market in general. One thing that I'm excited about is looking out for the September announcement of this transparent, open source, early stage kind of collaborative sharing of new technologies. I think that will garner a whole lot of interest, especially from this crew.
There was one question related to that. Somebody asked, how do we ensure the high quality of these listings? And there is a feasibility study, or let's say a compliance metrics that everybody needs to fill in before they can be listed there. So that's the first stage before the listing can take place.
Great. Well, you both are going to be very busy people, it sounds like. Good luck with the rest of the business growing, and look forward to tuning in and watching all of this evolve up through September.
Yeah, great. Well, looking forward to that, and of course working with everybody in this community. I think AirMiners is unique, and I should spend more time in Slack.
If folks want to reach out, after this event, let's drop emails for outreach. Oops, sorry, talking over Marianne. Let's drop emails for outreach, or if there are other ways for AirMiners folks to get to know Puro, feel free to share that now. Call to action. Oh, Jason, so on top of it. All right, I'll let you do your job. Thanks.
All good. So thank you, Sophie, for being an excellent moderator, and thank you, Antti, and thank you, Marianne, for your time today. This is a really interesting conversation. Regrettably, we are at time, so we're going to close the main part of our program today. We're going to hang on for Zoom networking, so we'll put you into randomly assigned breakout rooms for about 15, 20 minutes or so, and to get to know each other a little bit better. Our next AirMiners event is going to be in 2 weeks' time. We're going to try an open spaces format for direct air capture. So you, our audience, can go on AirMiners Slack if you're part of AirMiners Slack, link in the chat, so that you can so that you can have a vote in what the topics are going to be for breakout spaces in our open spaces about direct air capture. Also, we have our post-event survey. We love to hear what went well, what we can improve on, and what new initiatives you think that we can add on to our AirMiners event series. So feel free to add to that, click to that in the link in the chat. So thank you everyone for a lovely event. You've been a wonderful audience, and look forward to seeing you next time at a future AirMiners event. So thanks everyone.